Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corbin here with School Transportation News. Glad you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, by Propane, the energy for everyone, and by First Student, the largest provider of student transportation in North America. A little later, Miss Taylor Ekbatani is going to be speaking with the newly minted National Superintendent of the Year from AASA, Dr. Joe Gothard from St. Paul Public Schools, Minnesota, as well as Transportation Director Ben Harri. Also, I'll be speaking with Will McDermott, the head of student services at First Student. And we've always got the always impressive editorial extraordinaire, Mr. Ryan Gray. Welcome, Mr. Gray.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here with the nation.
I know. It's March Madness too, man. I mean, you got to feel the love. Basketball. I know you're Arizona. I'm San Diego State. We got to be rooting. There's already upsets in the first round. We're going to have all this fun basketball to talk about. It's always March Madness. It's a fun time of year. Something to get excited for. Absolutely.
Hey, at least Arizona didn't lose in the first round this year. So again, as you're hearing this, we know who is in the Sweet 16. But as of now, at least, I'm going to be a happy camper.
All right, early days. All right, Ryan, what kind of headlines we got this week?
Oh, there were several, Tony. So one of the big ones that hit last week, a lot of folks saw it. EPA finalized their light-duty passenger vehicle emissions rule, but with that, they also touched on Class 2B and Class 3 vehicles on the medium-duty side, up until now referred to as light medium duty, but now a medium-duty vehicle or MDV. Tony, this includes a lot of Type A's. So it's 8,500 pounds up to 14,000 pounds. So as we know, a lot of Type A's fall within that. Some of them, a little larger, are above this threshold. But what really it was the finalization of a lot of the rulings that have been in the works from the Biden administration, even before that, where everyone is trying to, at least in DC, a lot of folks are trying to really affect vehicle emissions. And looking at the lighter duty side, we'll say, we know that Type A fall under more of that, what we would consider a passenger vehicle. They're built on stripped or cutaway chassis from the likes of Ford, GM, and Stellantis. This is why we have the federal mandate for 3-point lap shoulder belts on Type A school buses, at least up to 10,000 pounds, as opposed to larger school buses, because they react in a crash more like our passenger vehicles. So essentially, what this is going to do is it's looking to cut greenhouse gas emissions, starting with the 2027 model year, going through 2032 and really beyond. For these MDVs or medium duty vehicles, there are some stipulations for the 2033 and later models to continue to cut GHGs, which are these oxides of nitrogen or NOx, as well as non-methane organic gases, NMOGs or NMOGs, I guess, as well as particulate matter.
Sounds like it's going to raise the price, Ryan.
Yes.
All I hear is cha-ching, cha-ching, more money.
Exactly. And we know school buses have been increasing anyways, and a lot of that has been tied to regulations, whether they be from EPA or from the California Resources Board. Here's the latest iteration, and now, affecting some Type A school buses. We know that on average, around 6,000 to 7,000, sometimes on a really good year, 8,000 Type A's are manufactured and ordered, in a given cycle, annual cycle. And, maybe say, I don't know, I don't have a figure to put to you, but maybe say, 3/4 of those will be impacted by this rule. And you're right, Tony, it is going to increase prices. EPA did provide some initial information on that for the medium duty vehicles. Really, we're looking at vans. Over the 6 years, they're saying on average over those 6 years, it's a $1,400 increase. But if you really look at it, it's an escalator. The first year, 2027, around $178 more. Then it goes to 185 for 2028. 29, it goes up to 1443. Then 2030, $2,700, $4,100 in 2031, $4,900 in 2032. So they kind of amortize it, I guess, and try to give a range, an average range. But certainly Type A's are going to be getting more expensive from this. Now, what this rule is not doing is it's not outlawing gasoline, because really gasoline, Tony, as we know, that's has the lion's share of the Type A market. We're talking about gasoline when we're talking about Type A's. They're not outlawing gasoline, but they're talking about looking toward next generation gasoline. So the rubber needs to meet the road on this. It's almost a 1,200 word document. I will admit I have not read the entire 1,200 pages yet, but it is my understanding that there could potentially be propane in here. Now we know that propane has left the Type A market. Gasoline certainly is there, and there's a lot of technology at work right now to make gasoline cleaner emitting, but it's also really pushing hybrids, battery electric, which that definitely falls within this industry, as well as plug-in hybrids. So they're definitely pushing electrics for the Type A school buses that would fall under this rule. So they said that this rule will provide nearly $100 billion in annual net benefits to society, $13 billion in annual health benefits alone, $62 billion in reduced fuel maintenance and repair costs. So the government's saying that folks will recover some of these costs because, of course, what we're going to see is the manufacturers pass along a lot of these costs to the consumer and, for us, to school districts and bus companies.
Yeah, I'd be curious, Ryan, because I know we've seen in some instances where the engineering wouldn't make sense to engineer a different engine every time, right? So do they just engineer it all the way up to the 3032 standard, and then the cost parity is met there? But I feel like it's an interesting dilemma that the manufacturers are put into. And obviously this just came out, and I know you called for reaction, and many were like caught a little, I think, flat-footed with, where do we go from here? And you got to really kind of circle the team up when something like this happens to just really understand, like, what is the impact to the customer? And granted, this doesn't really go into effect until 2027?
Correct. Yeah, 2027 model year through 2032.
Yeah. And we'll see if that doesn't constrict also the issue that we had with the chassis shortage, right? That was conflated, and we had seen 30% less availability of chassis, or increased demand. Demand was basically outstripping supply, which I think is still the case, if I'm not mistaken, in many cases on Type A chassis. But there are other factors that played into that. So we may see easing on that. But if all the chassis have to meet this new requirement, that may change the dynamic again, and we might be in the same boat again.
Exactly, catching up. And I've heard that the Type A chassis, those cutaway chassis, it has improved. We had the United Auto Workers strike, obviously, throw a wrinkle into that as well. But I think that what we're going to be seeing with Type A's, like you mentioned, is OEMs catching up, a lot like what they did coming out of COVID with just school bus in general. And we saw this in plenty in the larger truck sector as well, that there was just these order books were being filled up, and the OEMs weren't able to produce enough vehicles. And so it just bled into the next cycle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I mean, you can almost see the writing on the wall in some instances of this. So, more to come. We'll keep you guys apprised. stnonline.com for all the latest updates, news, and information. And guys, before we get to our interviews, we have a quick message from our sponsor. Do you remember a time when you could just cherry pick the best solution to run your school transportation operation? The best routing software may be one company. The best parent app could be another company. Those days are over. TransFinder said the old way of doing business doesn't work for today's busy and burdened school transportation departments. They need one partner, one solution. TransFinder has embraced this approach for years now, building award-winning solutions like Route Finder Plus, the driver app Wayfinder, parent app Stop Finder, and inventory management solution Service Finder. They also have field trip management solutions Trip Finder, and Viewfinder, which provide critical routing information to other stakeholders in the district. Add to this TransFinder's award-winning hardware and industry's best support and service. You have the ingredients that make up one partner, one solution. It's not just a slogan. It's TransFinder's way of doing business. Learn more by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or calling 800-373-3609. That's 800-373-3609. Remember, one partner, one solution. All right, School Transportation Nation, we got a special guest joining us this week. Will McDermott, Head of Student Services at First Student. He's an old friend, been around a few years. We've seen him at the TSD conference out in Frisco, Texas. He's always sharing knowledge with us, and had a chance to do a video interview with him. If you guys haven't checked it out on scnonline.com, definitely one to see. He's talking all about their FirstServes program, which we're going to dive into a little bit today on the podcast. Will, welcome, my friend.
Thanks, Tony. Hey, it's an honor to be here. Happy to be here. Love working with you in the past, and talking about student services is always the top of mind for me. So let's do it.
Excellent. Well, Will, before we get started, you want to share a little bit about you and your expertise. How does one become the head of student services at First Student?
Sure, Tony. Thanks for the question. My background, I'm actually a licensed special education teacher still, and a principal. And earlier in my career, I was fortunate enough to be involved with an organization called Hopewell, and I began developing therapeutic day schools for students with emotional disabilities, developmental disabilities. And during that time, I noticed that transportation, what a key initiative to bring more instructional time to students. So, we started Hopewell Transportation, which was a little different as an educator. Starting a business in transportation, I came from the other side of the industry of school transportation. And my company grew, and I joined the First Student team. They acquired my company. It was exciting because I get to work on student services all the time and across the country and have a bigger impact on students. And that's really our goal of our student services division, is to really help as many students as we possibly can arrive to school ready to learn, but also arrive home at the end of the day and ready to engage with their family. The bus is a great opportunity to provide some social emotional learning to students so that they can, feel like they're in a safe and predictable environment.
So dive a little bit into the FirstServes program for me, which seems to be all about making the journey to and from school a positive experience for students. Give us some insight on how that works.
Sure. Interdisciplinary education has been around for a while. So it's the same concept where we really want to connect the transportation departments with the student services and the special education departments of schools, and potentially the contractor. So there's sometimes 2 or 3 different, sometimes silos. We hope not to, because we're trying to intersect those at First Student. So our program is a training and development program. And the reason I say development is because all transportation providers, school districts, we all provide training. And the education research says that training is 15% effective when it's handled as a single event. So the system behind the training is important. So we have to train leaders to coach those drivers and attendants on the same principles on a daily basis. So we increase the effectiveness of that training by 70%. So that's really the design of FirstServes. And the way we do that is we try to bring that train management, support staff, drivers, and attendants to understand and appropriately respond to student behavior instead of react. Sometimes it's it's in human nature, we react to things. But when we understand behavior of students and we understand how to respond to that, we can really make change for students and influence their behavior in a positive way. The training also has been developed by some key researchers in the country. I think that's important. So we're looking to, like I said, bring that continuity of service between the classroom and the school bus.
Got it. So it sounds like FirstServes aims to bridge the gap between the ride to school and the classroom experience. Can you walk us through how the program makes the connection?
Sure. When drivers and monitors recognize behavior as a form of communication and have the tools to address it effectively, we can provide consistent and supportive environment that allows students to arrive to school, ready to learn. So we know children flourish when consistency is there. So through FirstServes, we're able to implement PBIS and social emotional learning on the general ed buses and all buses, right? But then we can also provide that individual support to students if they need it, and if it's in their IEP. So maybe a specific accommodation or intervention for a student that we learn with simple strategies that are taught in our training. By carrying those practices over to their ride to and from school, we can also provide a predictable and safe experience. I mentioned that earlier, and it's so important for students to feel safe so that when they arrive to school, they don't need to be de-escalated or go in a different room. They can start their day ready to learn.
Now, Will, just to clarify, when we're talking about FirstServes, you're talking about serving students with disabilities and special needs specifically, or is this for the general student population as well?
That's a great question, Tony. Like a lot of good products, they're sometimes born in special ed, and then we call it universal design. And we've expanded FirstServes. That's where we started, is really focusing on the individual intervention and accommodation. But now we've developed systems to implement your PBIS system, common language, character education, so that we can work with our partners and see what they're doing in the schools at a macro level and push it into the school bus so that they're getting that same language and they're driving towards that same goal.
Now, I know monitoring progress is key. How do you necessarily keep track of the effectiveness of the FirstServes program for your students, for your schools? What's that look like?
And I'm going to continue with the theme. Similar to when you're working with students in the classroom, collecting data is so important so we can measure progress. FirstActs is our number one tool that we use, and it's an online referral system, but it does more than that because within our system, drivers can actually enter it on the bus within their tablet when they're not moving. And it goes directly to our location and to the schools so that they're getting instant feedback on behavior. Now, part of our training, the average CDL driver's age, Tony, is 57. And part of our training is to teach drivers that we're not looking for consequences, but we're looking for opportunities to intervene. And the FirstAct system allows the school district to share some suggested interventions that our drivers have already been trained on for specific scenarios. So that total consistency is what really makes the program work. So FirstActs, out of 65 locations, FirstActs has shown us that FirstServes has shown a reduction of 27% of negative behaviors on the bus from 2022 to 2023 for locations that have implemented FirstServes. So a 27% reduction in negative behaviors. Because we started collecting data, we found that out. And now we can build on that data. So FirstActs doesn't just collect data on individual students. We can also use that by school district to target training. So maybe we're having a high incidence of students getting out of their seat elopement. We have research-based interventions to help that, and we can train drivers and attendants, that whole bus team, to provide appropriate and meaningful accommodations and interventions for students by the use of data. So we measure our success and progress monitor it often. It's a requirement of FirstServes to do that quarterly, but oftentimes with customers, we're doing that monthly, or if we have a bus with a lot of incidents on it, we'll even do it sooner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So, for school districts that would be interested in tapping into what FirstServes has to offer, what are the steps that people should take to get on board to look at this kind of really creative intervention-based solution?
Yeah, just, reach out to us at First Student. You can go to our website at firststudentinc.com and fill out a contact form. Or you can email us at studentservices@firststudentinc.com. It's important to note that districts don't need to have a full service contract with First Student to use the program. It's offered as a standalone service to both districts who handle their own transportation in-house and those who partner with providers. So we want to help. I said in the beginning, Tony, we want to help as many students as possible. So just reach out. We're happy to, meet anybody and hopefully implement FirstServes as soon as possible.
Sounds like it really helps the drivers and attendants too. I'm sure they're very excited to see a decrease in behavioral issues of double digit. I feel like your driver retention is shooting up as a result of that.
Tony, in our surveys, we have seen an increase of retention at our FirstServes locations when compared to our other locations who haven't implemented yet. So you're absolutely right. And then our surveys after driver training, our post surveys, they feel so much more comfortable working with students. When drivers just understand that behavior is a language and the students are trying to tell us something, it's amazing. It's amazing the interactions you see when that light bulb goes off.
Well, guys, Will McDermott, Head of Student Services at First Student, we really appreciate you coming on, sir, and sharing a little bit about some of the innovative programs you have to share. Guys, don't forget, go check them out, firststudentinc.com. Fill out that contact form, get in touch with them, have Will and his team help you out, share a little bit, some fresh ideas, guys. Always trying to push the limits here on School Transportation Nation. So, Will, appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, guys, we got an amazing interview with Miss Taylor Ekpatani and the newly minted AASA Superintendent of the Year coming right up. Before we do that, we've got a quick message from our sponsor. This week's Green Tip is brought to you by Propane, the energy for everyone. Did you know that school buses fueled by propane can help you reduce emissions in your community while saving you money? Propane school buses have a lower average carbon intensity than electric school buses over their lifetime by more than half, and they emit up to 96% less nitrogen oxide than diesel buses. All this from fleets with the lowest total cost of ownership. It's no wonder propane is the most widely used alternative fuel for school buses. Learn more at betterourbuses.com. That's betterourbuses.com.
All right, guys. So Taylor here, and I am with another special guest, a finalist for the AASA, but not only a finalist, the winner. So I am very excited to welcome Dr. Joe Gothard to the podcast. He's the superintendent of St. Paul Public Schools in Minnesota, and he is joined by Ben Harri, the transportation director. So welcome, guys. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Taylor. Look forward to the conversation.
So you're famous now, the 2024 Superintendent of the Year, and then also St. Paul Public Schools is in the limelight. So can you kind of walk me through that day for you, Dr. Gothard? I know it was a whirlwind of a day.
Yeah, a few things going on, Taylor. On February 15th in San Diego for the Association of American School Administrators, AASA conference, where I was a finalist, and they were to name later that day the National Superintendent of the Year on stage with all the other state winners. Really just a great venue, great atmosphere to be with all of my national colleagues on that day of recognition. But the day actually started with me receiving a phone call in my hotel room with an offer for a new position from the Madison Metropolitan School District, a position I had been a named finalist for, and they just happened to make their decision that morning, right before the award was given that afternoon. So emotions wise, it was all over the place, as you can imagine, and also knowing that my colleagues were back in St. Paul, taking part in a teacher contract negotiations that were going as planned, but again, a very tense situation with just making sure that we could get a settled contract, which we eventually did. But all these are going on at the same time. And there were moments that felt like time was stopped and frozen, and other moments that just kind of pushed through. And before you know it, the snap of a finger, I'm back in St. Paul. But an incredible day to be there with peers and colleagues and people I respect. The actual naming of the award and naming me as the national superintendent, a quick chance to gather myself and say a few words, but many different names and thoughts went through my head in terms of just the people who are so important to me and truly responsible for me, even, being in the position that I am, and let alone getting state and now national recognition, a really special moment.
Mm-hmm. And just to give our listeners some background, you actually grew up in Madison and attended the Madison Metropolitan School District.
I did. I grew up and attended K through 12 there. And then the first 18 years of my career, beginning in 1993, I had various positions there. I was an educational assistant, a high school biology teacher, a head coach, a middle school principal, high school principal, assistant superintendent, all in 18 incredible years before coming to Minnesota, where I've been a superintendent now in my 11th year.
Okay. And so did you apply for the Madison position, or did they just kind of pull your name from a hat?
No, it was a thorough process, very thorough process. The community was involved in a lot of their preliminary, engagement and providing information, a candidate profile. So a national search. And again, I really truly wanted to earn the position based on merit. Of course, I was a familiar name, someone who from the community. But I truly approached it like, I have to demonstrate why I'm the right candidate for that job. And I'm very grateful that their board selected me. And now in that transition period, I'm trying to leave St. Paul as steady as possible, getting as much as I can done to set my team and their community up for future success as well as I transition.
Okay, so you were kind of looking at or eyeing going home in that transition.
Absolutely. It's a good feeling. There's a lot of hard work to do there. I don't think I've met a public school leader from any state or city in the country who would say that they don't have challenges that they face. They're just different challenges, different state. And even though I've been gone for 11 years, there are definitely some familiar things that I'm sure will be brought back to me. But there's a lot of new as well, new people, new laws, new models, new ways that the district is working, many new leaders throughout the city. So it's an exciting time to get back and reacquaint myself with the city and the surrounding community as well.
Mm-hmm. So you've been 11 years as a superintendent at St. Paul then?
My first 4 years in Minnesota, I was in Burnsville, Egan Savage, about 25 minutes south of here, a South Metro district, and then my 7th year here in St. Paul.
Okay, gotcha. So I obviously hope you went out that night in San Diego and celebrated the big news.
Well, it was, it's a large conference, thousands of leaders and vendors and partners. And I'm also the president of our Minnesota Association for School Administrators. So we actually had our board dinner that night. So I got to celebrate with some really great people. My wife was along with, so it was really special to just kind of take in the evening in downtown San Diego with all of them.
Good. So when coming back then to St. Paul, I'm sure the celebrations continued and the school district just, showered you in love.
Well, I think in part, certainly my team and those I work with every day, but we had to jump right back into, again, getting that teacher contract settled and a myriad of other things that we're working with here and getting a budget ready for next year. So I've definitely taken some time to enjoy people reaching out, both from near and far. But again, not too caught up in that, really mission focused and, making sure that I remain who I am and centered for our kids and for our community.
Mm-hmm. So jumping into St. Paul a little bit, what are some highlights operationally you can share? And Ben, maybe if you want to touch on the transportation operations as well and what that kind of looks like.
Well, sure. I'll begin real quick and then just hand it off to Director Harri. Certainly the pandemic has been a challenge, and I can maybe get into some of those details for what we learned and what we endured through that. But I'm really proud of the operations overall that we have in St. Paul Public Schools. The capital city, we're looked on as a large employer, one of the second largest landowner in St. Paul. And in my time here, we have done almost $500 million or more of construction projects. So we're renovating our schools to meet 21st century demands and needs. So it's been a really exciting time as well. In addition to that, and I'll let Director Harri share more of this, to remain the kind of district that we are and really have equity as a focus, we want to make sure that there's a way and an opportunity for a student to attend any school that they choose. So we've created a very much a citywide and a regional map so that students, no matter where they live, can access a school program of their choosing if that's what they so desire. So while it puts a lot of stresses on the system in terms of the needs that we have to meet, it absolutely is based on equity and what's right for students. So it's a great feeling and something I'm very proud of in St. Paul Public Schools.
Yes, and I came on right after probably one of the most challenging years St. Paul Public Schools has faced. So I don't know if I've came in at the right time, I guess, for this position, but I hear from a lot of my colleagues, different directors throughout the country within our state about how they're, facing challenges with driver shortages. And St. Paul Public Schools has invested quite a bit of money in, bringing drivers back into driving positions, creating more of a career rather than, a part-time job where you're working a couple hours in the morning, you're taking a large break in the afternoon or middle of the day, and then a couple more hours in the afternoon. Some of our companies that we partner with have, a base of 7 hours, where drivers were only getting drive time before. So we've come up with a lot of creative ideas on how to retain people for St. Paul Public Schools families. And it's really helped this year. We had our RFP with 17 companies responding to the RFP. So I don't know if that word gets out to people and they want to participate. I don't know how many we've had in the past, but it's created some competition and leveled out some of the costs that we saw increase over the last couple of years. And it's going to help us in the next couple of years as far as balancing budgets and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And what was the RFP for?
Yellow bus transportation.
Okay.
Yep.
And I know you guys primarily contract with First Student. You have a couple of local vendors, I believe, but First Student has a little less than half of your routes.
That's correct. Yep. Right now they have 100 of our 250 routes.
Okay.
But we have 7 total vendors right now. And it's put together with some local and some larger regional contractors.
What is kind of the lay of the land, if you will, of St. Paul Public Schools? Students transported and also kind of your geography, terrain?
Terrain, flat. We have some hilly areas, but nothing too crazy in terms of terrain. We work closely with the city on addressing those when snow events, ice, rain, not rain, but weather conditions come up. We work closely with the city to address those as soon as possible. We have a 3-tier system. So we have a 7:30, 8:30, and 9:30 school, and then same for the afternoon, and about 255 routes per tier. So,
oh wow, okay,
you can kind of calculate those numbers out, and we transport 23,000 students, or that's how many are assigned. It's something that we keep talking about in terms of do we want families to tell us that they want their students to ride, but with just the communication and all of the different moving parts, families coming in and out of the district, different languages. We initially assign students to buses right away. So there is no opting in or opting out. We may look at some different ways to create efficiencies in the future, but right now we have internal routing. So we have 10 staff in our department that route everything for the contractors. Different school districts do it different ways. We found this to be the best and most efficient way. We have a lot of people that know the city streets. They're familiar. They used to be bus drivers. So we found that to be our best for our district.
Okay, so to clarify, you're routing for every student in the district, whether or not they ride the school bus.
Pretty much, unless the parent says, I'm bringing my student to school, or they're a walker. So we have different parameters for that.
Okay.
But walkers we don't route, and parents that elect to drop off and pick up their students we don't route.
And I know coming out of the pandemic, one of the things that you guys did was put some high school students on public transit. And just recently, I want to say at the start of this year, you were able to bring all high school students back onto yellow bus service. So why was that, a big important initiative for you guys?
Yeah, maybe I'll start here, Taylor. First of all, July of 2021, I'll never forget the phone call. One of my team members called and said, Soup, we're 50 drivers short. And, I knew right then and there, a lot of other districts around us had been going through a lot of challenges, districts that had been kind of open and back to normal service sooner were experiencing the stress of driver shortages and things of that nature. Well, things even got worse. About 4 weeks later, we got another call that we were 50 more drivers short. So we found ourselves about 100 drivers short, just weeks before the school year. Now, thankfully, we live in a city that has a metro transit, both in light rail and in bus service. And we knew that it was a possibility for us to have students use those services to get to and from school. Some of the major differences are, Director Harri and his staff can route bus stops to be close in proximity, both obviously to the schools that they're arriving to or picking up from, but more importantly, the households. And when you have to rely on, city and metro-wide routes, we don't have that convenience. So the stops are many times a bit of a walk from the school, certainly a bit of a walk from the different households and things of that nature. And then you also have to consider the public transit nature of it, depending on the time of the day, perhaps where the buses are, where the light rail is going through parts of the city. I think our students experienced it in a lot of different ways. Some of the concerns that I heard from families and from students was about safety. And, we had to listen to that. And at the time, there really wasn't a plan B. I mean, this was our plan. We had to invest in buying tickets to make sure that our students could use that service. But after time and working with Director Harri, he was pretty confident that we could do some rerouting and begin to fold in and take some of our high schools off of Metro Transit and bring them back and restore yellow buses. So little by little, he and his team were able to do that. And this past winter break, we brought our last high school on to yellow buses, restoring all of our high schools to yellow bus, with the exception of one of our comprehensive high schools and a smaller creative arts secondary school, which have used Metro Transit for a decade or more. So really appreciate the patience and the kid and service friendly or focused efforts by Director Harri and his team. Was not easy to do that. And anytime you're rerouting, during the school years is going to have, some possible downfalls to it too. But I have to say, this is probably the fewest calls I've received in regards to transportation this year. Some of it's probably due to weather. We've had the most mild upper Midwest winter I can remember in my 52 years of existence, but just really happy with everything, how it's come back. And I think Director Harri working with our partners and our vendors, it just goes to show you that those relationships, they matter in the classroom and what we're doing with students, but it really matters with our community when we're providing services for our school district and for our students as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because after the published article that you wrote, I did receive a call from Metro Transit, and they said, are you planning to bring back Johnson and Creative Arts? I said, oh, no, sorry. Wonder if I should maybe go and correct that, but they will continue to stay on Metro Transit, Johnson, and Creative Arts. So I'm glad we got to clarify that one here on the podcast.
So are you guys still short drivers?
No, we're doing really well. Our companies, they're asking us for more work. We're able to cover more field trips than we have in the past during prime time hours. Something some of our schools have been desiring for the last couple of years, but we're doing very well here in St. Paul.
That's good. And I know you have some in-house drivers and that you kind of do for students with special needs or individualized education programs. But in kind of general, why is working with your contractors and building that relationship so important?
I think a lot of districts probably debate this on whether they want to have in-district busing or contracted busing. I think just it's worked for us the way that we handle our busing here in St. Paul. We see the challenges that other districts face with hiring drivers, training drivers, retaining drivers. So we've found that contracting has worked, the best for St. Paul schools.
And I think from our standpoint too, Taylor, I think the other piece to consider is, we are in a very developed city with, very little space in terms of where are we going to store, 200 plus buses, maintain them, the workforce required for that, although I'm sure, give us 10, 15 years, but making that transition, especially at a time like this, could prove very challenging as well. So I think, the information that Director Harri just shared in terms of 17 responses to our RFP has us, considering that right now this is the best model for St. Paul Public Schools.
And I know through your partnership with First Student, you guys are receiving 10 electric school buses through the EPA Clean School Bus Program. So when are you expected to receive those? Is infrastructure being set up? What's kind of happening there?
From what I know, it's just in the initial stages. So First Student's kind of updating me here and there on things, but I think they're just in the initial planning stages of that. They have a base that's in Oakdale, Minnesota. So it's not far from St. Paul, just a few miles away. So they're looking at the infrastructure of what they need to bring into there. And I know Xcel Energy is partnering with them as well on the electrification and getting that service up to their property line. And then First Student operates several hundred electric buses in Quebec. So they should be a good partner in terms of cold weather and how to operate electric school buses in this sort of climate.
There is a lot of demand. Our community, sustainable energy buildings is non-renewable energies. It's just a big topic right now across the country. Our students and many of our staff and community members have really taken this on. So it couldn't come at a better time. I think the only question would be 10 out of 250. I think everybody, not everybody, I think many would like the entire fleet to be electric, of course, very early in kind of this proliferation. And I think, hopefully for the future, we can find more efficient ways, more effective ways, and that technology will only get better and better.
Yeah. And I know there's another rebate. So did you guys apply for that one as well? Or are you kind of waiting to see how these first 10 go?
No, we're in on that one too.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're ready. You're grabbing the bull by the horns.
Yeah, I've gone in a couple rides in electric school buses. It's a much different experience for sure. But, we want to see how they work. Mm-hmm. You don't want to relieve an electric bus with a diesel bus and then have that electric bus, parked. So I think starting small and learning from it is going to be the best for us. Yeah.
I'm going to put you guys on the spot for a second, but can you kind of talk about administration and transportation's relationship and how you guys ensure that's strong, it's a working relationship? Because it's not always that you see, the superintendent and the transportation director, on a podcast together.
Yeah, well, I'll start and I'll see if Director Harri has anything to add to this. But his predecessor, again, was very well known here in St. Paul Public Schools, but also throughout the country and the work that he did, really respected and just a really responsive, very capable, excellent leader. And Ben has transitioned into the role very well. He worked as part of our team, and we have an excellent operations team. So I know that he gets a lot of support there, and I get a lot of updates about his work through Executive Chief Turner, who oversees administration operations for the district. So I know the kind of culture that those divisions have. And he's just been such a natural fit, I think, for the work that we do. I've probably sent him some texts and maybe some phone calls, rattled at times, and he's always calm. I think somebody who can match my calmness is really calm. So I appreciate that. And what I can share about Ben is that rarely have I ever heard him say no. He finds a way to get things done. And I know that when he does, that it's going to be safe. It's going to make sure that it meets the goals and objectives that we have as a district in terms of customer service and, the services that we're providing our students and their families. and just really overall proud of his work and his entire department. They've just done a great job.
Yeah, I think, the same thing, he's texted me and I tell my wife, I'm like, oh, I got a text from Superintendent Gothard. Like, what do I say back? And so I run those things by her before I say anything. But since my time here, I've been in the school district since 2018. I've been a part of Dr. Gothard's district-wide events, and just the way he speaks to his team, to the district leaders in general, is just, you take something with you after those talks that he's had, and it really kind of focuses you back in. Like, he talks about how challenging it is in an urban district, and our work is hard, and there's not a lot of easy stuff that you're going to be involved in. And, how he's talked about you're everything to everyone, and that's what people expect out of you. And just handling things, like he said, in a calm manner, and working together with, your supervisor or whatever it is to accomplish goals. That's kind of what I've always shot for, or that's what my goals are, is to make things easy for whoever I'm working with or working for.
But Taylor, that's all the good stuff. I've got to go back in time a little bit. Let's rewind the tape, because back in January of 2018, before Director Harri, I had a welcome to St. Paul moment. This was in my first year, and it was our first large snowstorm. And, we didn't cancel school on that day. And about 10 in the morning, I was actually out in the city at a different meeting. And one of our board members looks at me and says, you know what, you made the right call. And there were just some wet, heavy flakes coming down, kind of that picturesque city snowfall where you're like, wow, this is beautiful. 3 hours later, you couldn't see out our windows. And of course, in a 3-tier system, you can't just pull things back. We're either in, we're all in, or we're all out. There is no in between. Well, we were all in on that day. And unfortunately, we had buses out stuck in the city, midnight, 1 a.m. Our mayor was out pushing people out, delivering cookies and things like that. It was really a pretty traumatic event, I think, for many of our students and families and staff, going through that. And the next day I had a press conference with the mayor. Glad that he showed up, but I'll admit to you, it's probably the most full a press room has ever been. Everybody wanted in on that story. The cameras were clicking. My knees were shaking. And, I had to say, I'm sorry. Mother Nature did not cooperate with a decision that I thought was the best decision, the right decision. And again, for me, it just made me focus in on, all right, what did we miss in terms of weather, but what else could we do transportation wise? Are there communication gaps? So we used it as an opportunity to get better. Mm-hmm. Certainly didn't shy away from it or minimize the effect or the impact that it had on people. And I will also share that the National Weather Service became one of our closest partners. In the information that we get now on a regular basis, even for Thursday, where it's 1 to 2 inches, we get just as much information for an event like that as we might for a foot or more. Now, again, this year we haven't had to use it, knocking on wood, but again, feel very prepared and confident in the team based on what we learned, 6 years ago now, that we're going to make, the best decisions based on information that we have. And that communication and trust has to be in multiple directions, not just Ben and I. It's got to be for the entire team of who we're listening to make these decisions.
And you mentioned the transportation director before Ben, and I want to say that was Tom Burr.
It was definitely Tom Burr. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have an article on him as well on our website. We profiled him for I believe it was the Wisdom profile piece. He has a lot of knowledge in the industry. He's been at a couple of our conferences. So He's retired now. Is that so?
He still follows a little bit. I see him popping up on social media now and then, but have not called him at 4 a.m. I'm sure he appreciates that.
Well, that's all right. Ben's in his spot now. He can have those 4 a.m. phone calls.
Yep.
Awesome. So to wrap things up a little bit, what's next, Dr. Gothard? I know you're planning your move. So do you have ideas already on what you want to do in Madison or how you want to leave St. Paul? I believe Madison Metropolitan also contracts with First Student. So that should be an easy transition for you there.
We do. As I was obviously First Student being a sponsor of the National Superintendent of the Year, Claire Miller was part of some of the discussions, and then there to present the award. So I've checked in with her a little bit during this entire transition for me as well. So I am aware of first student being there. I think for me, it's transportation. I've learned both in what I described as that weather event, but even more importantly, that our students came to me and said, listen, we want our yellow buses back. It's an important part of what we do. You are likely also aware that the chronic absenteeism rates that we're seeing across the country are an all-time high as well. And, to think that transportation isn't a really important part of that, I think we're missing an opportunity to really get out and understand and see if our transportation goals are meeting the same needs that our students have and our families have. So I think it's got to be one of these things where we're constantly checking in, getting information, getting feedback to ensure that we're maximizing transportation to drive the student experience, whether that be getting to school, getting home from school, after school activities, field trips has been mentioned. It's an important part. And, I in the city early in the mornings as I'm making the drive in, and there is no shortage of yellow buses around the city. You kind of lose track of what's on the side of them. So I can clearly tell that it's a really important part of what this community has come to expect and demand to get their children, to and back home from school.
Well, thank you both for coming on. Great to have you, and was a wonderful conversation. And congrats again, Dr. Gothard, and to St. Paul Public Schools.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So to learn more about Dr. Gothard and St. Paul Public Schools, stay tuned for the April issue. Dr. Gothard is our cover star along with Claire Miller at First Student. So very exciting, and that will come out on the 1st. So stay tuned for that.
All right, School Transportation Nation, it was a great episode. Special thanks to Mr. Ryan Gray, Taylor Ekbatani, Dr. Joe Gothard. Congratulations again on winning that AASA Superintendent of the Year award, as well as Ben Harri. Thanks for jumping on, being a part of this great episode, guys. Very informational, great conversations. Will McDermott, too. Special shout out to him. Had a student service for First Student, also one of our sponsors. Special thanks to them. Also, TransFinder, as well as Propane, the Propane Education Research Council. We love them. We love Propane, guys. You should too. All right. All the great information, stnonline.com. Don't forget STN Expo as well this summer. Make sure and sign up. Lock in that super early bird rate over there in Reno. We got our early bird in Indianapolis. Make sure to go to stnexpo.com for all the latest information. Don't forget to keep an eye on the STN website as well for that new April issue. It's going to be out in a few days. I know you can't wait. Make sure to check it out on the website. Click that magazine tab. Read all the latest and greatest we have for you. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.